Well, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm very excited to announce something that we're doing that is brand new. This is the MVP to MVP Public Speaking webinar series. This is the first one in the series of 4. Our topic today is around presentation delivery, and Dale Ziegler will be our host, which is awesome. And I just want to take a second to explain what this is and what this whole team is about. This is presented by the MVP presentation team. We've been meeting since the Lex Summit, and our mission is to enable, empower, and encourage you guys to evangelize Salesforce to speak publicly and create presentation content at a high level of effectiveness and inspiration. So we're very excited to do this because this is our first major event that we're doing, and we may even share this out with the larger community. We're going to record this session. You are being recorded now. And the link at the bottom right, if you guys want, bit.ly/MVPPresJune, that's for the June registration. So check that out, get registered for that one. And let me go ahead and hand it off to Dale here, who's going to be our host today.
MVP. Well, thank you, Phil. As he mentioned, I am Dale Ziegler. I am the Salesforce practice lead here at the Claris Group in Kansas City. I am in my second term of being an MVP, hoping that renewals come through and get third. So, as he mentioned, we're here to talk about presentations and specifically delivery. So, presentation skills come naturally for some. They may require work and patience for others, but overall, they can help drive important messages to mass audiences, and so that's why we're here. Whether it's a user group meeting or Dreamforce or a regional event or even in your company's conference rooms, we're all going to have to give a presentation at some point in our career. So there's many components that go into a good presentation, and in this webinar and in this panel, we're going to talk specifically about delivery, especially preparation strategies and how to best conduct the presentation at go live time. So, why are presentations important? Well, the delivery is important because it comes down to a simple math equation. Expertise plus confidence leads to engagement. A good speaker should pick a topic he or she is knowledgeable about, which, that sounds like common sense, but what's often underappreciated is the level of confidence that comes from that underlying expertise. Presenters who speak with conviction are more likely to drive their message home to an audience. Confidence can also create a safe space for the speaker to be more natural, incorporate organic body language, and if the subject matter warrants, even some humor. But as the speaker proves to be knowledgeable and have confidence in the message, the audience is more likely to engage, ask questions, and most importantly, take home tangible information to act upon. Good presenters are no different than award-winning actors. Many of us watch movies to consume a good story. Great actors and actresses strive to be the character they're portraying, whether fictional or not. Pathos is the secret sauce to a good performance. For some, playing the role comes from living similar life experiences. For others, it comes from spending a considerable amount of time with that character's inspiration. My personal favorite movie character of all time is Forrest Gump. For nearly 3 hours, the audience witnessed a portrait of a very simple man telling powerful stories to complete strangers who were just captivated because he lived those stories himself. So when we're giving presentations, empathy and sympathy are key ingredients to capturing the audience's attention. So why are presentations important to me? Well, my story is I've presented at user groups, Midwest Dreamin', Dreamforce, and I've had a blast every single time. My first instinct, though, is to be a helper. My second is to talk. And those combined with my passion for Salesforce mean I can't shut up. Just ask my incredibly loving and patient wife. I love knowing that through a session I lead, someone is going to learn something new. We in the community are all here to help each other, and being able to present to the masses fits right into my comfort zone. I only pick topics I know I can talk about, and I know what I've lived through. Those factors make presenting fun for me, and my goal as part of the MVP presentation team is to help others realize that same level of enjoyment. So with that, I'm honored to introduce our first of 3 speakers, Ms. Amber Boaz.
give us 1 minute as we hand it over to Amber here. Amber, I did unmute you, and we'll give you control in 1 second here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right, can folks confirm they can see my floating head? I'm going to assume you can. All right. I am Amber Boaz, as you guys know, or most of you anyway. I am Amber9904 on Twitter, and I work at Red Hat, and that is my disembodied head. All right, so let's talk a little about how to prepare for good delivery, what you can do before the presentation. So the main thing, recommendation-wise, given chances are you're going to be presenting something in the internet, is to get rid of distractions, specifically in your browser. I don't know if, I'm hopeful that most of you don't have browser windows that look like this, because that's just frightening. I'm sure you have older relatives that might, but this isn't useful, right? This is super distracting from the content, which is not even the bottom third of this screen. So mute those things, remove them, hide them, do whatever you need to do to make sure that the browser is uncluttered. And while you're doing that, please turn off notifications, because I don't want to see your spouse asking you to pick up milk on the way home. Your desktop, same sort of thing, right? So when I see a screen like this, I spend way too much time trying to remember what all those little icons mean and which programs they go to and reading your file names. Yeah, I'm reading your file names. I'm doing it. I'm also trying to figure out what the heck is the background here. I can't tell what this is, but 9 times out of 10, it's usually your kids or your dog or your cat or some combination thereof. And that's great. I highly recommend that people personalize their workspace. But for a presentation, it's just super distracting and frankly a little bit gross. So hide all that stuff. So during your presentation, now that you're all prepared, now that your laptop's ready and you're all plugged in, one of the key things to remember is you're the expert, right? You've been asked to speak on this thing, or you volunteered to speak on this thing, and you're the person they came to see. You are the expert in the room. I don't pretend to be an expert on presenting, but you know, I have done it quite a bit, and people seem to respond positively. So having that confidence of being the expert in the room and knowing that people are there to hear what you have to say. So if you flub something or mispronounce a word, it is not the end of the world. It will be okay. So body language, right? You guys can't see me because I don't have my webcam on for very good reasons. I haven't showered yet today. But body language is important. So you standing up straight, hands on the hips or hands in the pockets, a way to convey kind of a power pose, right? I'm here, I know what I'm talking about, I know what I'm doing, you can listen to me. Even if people can't see you, it comes through in your voice, it comes through in your mannerisms, it comes through in your style. So having that upright posture, a smile, right? You guys can hear me smiling, whereas if I'm not, you can tell. That's one of those innate human things that we're really good at. So be real cognizant of your body language. This is doubly true, of course, when people can see you, right? Like when they can see you, they can see you. So be careful not to stand on one foot, you know, kind of lean on the podium, that sort of thing. Those are all crutches, we all do it, but just be cognizant of the fact that you're doing it. So with your presentation, you're going to want to tell a story, right? And there will be subsequent webinars about, you know, having a beginning, a middle, and an end to your presentation. You know, the whole tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, that whole thing. But telling a story about how you got there that morning, how the weather is gorgeous or not. You know, at Dreamforce, talking about the crowds, you know, talking about, you know, people moving to the front of the room. Get people engaged early and tell them a little bit about, you know, what you're going to do and why they're there. If it's appropriate, tell a joke. I don't tend to volunteer for content that wouldn't benefit from a joke, but folks may not laugh. It may be 8 o'clock on the 3rd day of Dreamforce, and they may not get your humor at all. But that's okay, right? You're attempting to build rapport. Most people won't get up in front of a crowd, and so the fact that you're willing to do it, they're literally physically looking up to you, right? And so honoring that and being willing to put yourself out there means a lot to the people in the room. So, but being funny definitely engages them. I am pretty sure Steve is going to talk about this more in a minute. Pretty sure. I feel fairly confident. Another way is to ask questions. Rhetorical questions work. You know, who's a local? How many people flew? Are your arms tired? You know, stuff to get folks engaged. In big rooms, I like to try to engage, especially with the folks in the first couple rows, because those tend to be the extroverts, the folks who come to the front, and so they kind of can get the room going, and that's really helpful. But you know, what did you hope to get out of this presentation? How many people are using Lightning? You know, who's excited for the next release? Those sorts of things. Asking people questions gets them engaged. So eye contact. And this is the scariest part, right? People are looking at you, literally, physically looking at you if you're on stage. Making eye contact with people in the room, right? Kind of moving from face to face, not in a jumpy way, not in a stare somebody down sort of way, but in a, you know, hey, I'm talking to you. So this is not the best stock art, but this guy's clearly giving a presentation. He's making good eye contact. It's working out well. There is such a thing as bad eye contact. That's this sort of stare down creepiness, right? I don't know if you guys have ever been in a presentation where someone they found somebody in the room and stared at them the entire time. That doesn't serve anybody, and it's frankly a little creepy, so I'm going to move from this slide. All right. If when you are presenting, hopefully there is a friendly face in the room. If there isn't, and I'm there at that event, let me know, and I'm happy to be that friendly face. Pay attention to that person and look around them. One real easy way in a really big room to make eye contact, air quotes, eye contact, is to look at people's shoulders. They can't tell you're not looking them in the eye. It's because you're far enough away. So you don't have to have that. If that makes you anxious, just look at their shoulders. Super easy trick. Okay, but I'm also happy and more than willing to be that friendly face in the room. So if you're doing a demo or have slides and PowerPoint crashes, or Google Slides crashes, or the internet crashes, or the fire alarm goes off, or you're on stage and you fall off the stage, or stuff happens, right? It just happens. Roll with it. This is not the end of the world. You're not going to go hungry. Your children will not, you know, be hungry. Stuff happens. No presentation is that big. None of us are that important. So just roll with it, right? If you can make a joke, great. If you can't, that's fine too. People understand. Live demos are inherently risky. They get it. If the interlude goes on long enough, folks may start to murmur in the crowd. With any luck, somebody's there to help you, kind of, so you can work the crowd while they're fixing the issue. If you can't, that's fine too. People get it. It happens. There's no reason to panic. It's gonna be okay. The chaos monkey chooses you. And if all else fails, if everything else is going wrong, the internet, the lights are off, the internet isn't working, just get up there and interpretive dance. Just groove. Just move your body. Just make it happen. This is how I handle things. I'm not above making a fool of myself, as most of you know. This is how I handle those sorts of chaos situations. This may not be for you, but this really works for me. It very much disarms people, and it takes all of the anxiety out of the situation. And with that, Dale, are there any questions?
Absolutely there are. Thank you very much, first of all. I do have two questions for you. So you, as well as Steve and Joshua, have been inspirations to me. I've drawn like little bits and pieces from you guys and watching your presentations at Dreamforce and tried to incorporate that in mine. What I especially love about your methodology is, you know, you're not afraid of the song and dance, and your humility, but you're calm under pressure when things go wrong. What did it take for you to actually get yourself there, though?
Practice.
Easy enough.
And not just practicing the content, right? I've had lots of things go wrong in presentations. And I don't tend to get stage fright anymore. I don't tend to. It still happens sometimes. But I found for me that if I can be goofy or a little bit, it's disarming, right? It takes the edge off. It makes things less formal. It makes the audience more forgiving. If I were up there in, you know, a suit and heels and stockings and had my hair all floofed and a ton of makeup and, you know, talked in broad strokes, I wouldn't have the credibility I have because that's not who I am. So, yeah, that.
Well, very good. Be yourself. Absolutely. And so then also, you mentioned it earlier about cleaning up your presentation space. What is the weirdest bookmark you have seen while watching a visual presentation?
Oh, so so this guy had clearly had some sort of medical thing going on in his family, because there was not just a bookmark, it was a folder labeled toe fungus pictures. And I needed to know what was in that folder. I didn't know him well enough to ask, but he had a bookmarked folder labeled toe fungus pictures. So I'll leave you up with that.
Admittedly, when we prepared for this presentation, you said you had a doozy. I was not expecting that. That is strangely awesome. Well, okay. Well, again, thank you. And I, like I said, you've inspired me over the 6-7 years I've been in the community, and I know there are several others who feel the exact same. So thank you for contributing to this.
I love doing it. Thanks, Dan.
Great. Well, so next up, all the way from, I believe he's back in India right now, is Mr. Joshua Hoskins.
Hey, Dale, thank you. It's hard to follow that. Amber, so much great information. I still learn something from you every time we speak. Glad to be here with Amber, Steve, Phil, and Dale to talk about sort of my top 10 tips of giving presentations. So if you know me, you pretty much know that I like to travel. And I like to be in pretty much every place that things happening. I've been in Sydney, I've been in London for World Tour. But in all of those places, you really have to focus on knowing your audience. And the reason why you want to know your audience is because there may be specific cultural differences, or there may be different roles that you'll have as a part of your audience. So it's going to be important for you to be able to direct your communication to the right wavelength for the people to understand. So for instance, if you're speaking to developers, you know that they're going to want to see code, they're going to want to be hands-on, they're going to take it to the next level. Whereas executives are more high level, they want to see dashboard charts, they want to be future thought thinking. But also you'll have cultural differences, such as shaking your head up and down versus left and right. Whether in India, there's a lot of different things you want to think about, especially if you're going to be an international speaker. More importantly, you want to be able to understand what motivates them, right? What motivates your audience, and what's going to allow them to take your content and share it, and also learn from it as well. My second point is let the audience know what they will take away early, so that they can plan. And this one I love to do, because I have this little thing that I do, which is called purpose, process, outcome. I start out saying the purpose of my presentation is, the process of me delivering the content will be X, Y, and Z. And then by the end of the presentation, this is what you'll get from the outcome. This does two things. It enables the audience to really understand the flow of your presentation, so they can understand your thinking in the design, but it also allows them to understand if they should really sit through your session. If their session is too detailed, or maybe the outcome doesn't match with them, you give them an opportunity to exit before your talk even gets into the details. It's a lot better than having that one person who realizes that they're in the wrong room get up in the middle of the presentation and walk out the room and cause a distraction. That's always a good tip. Third is weave in some direct participation into your presentation. And I underline here direct participation, because I think we've all been in those presentations where you'll ask a question, it's very open-ended, very broad, and you have people that are shy to raise their hands, so you end up getting crickets, right? And you get no response. So when you ask for participation, direct it towards someone so you get that response back, as opposed to saying, okay, let me ask someone else, or redirecting your attention to the next thought. So when you're engaging people, make sure it's direct and you know who you're calling on, or you basically ask for what you want to receive back. My favorite one of all is probably seed support. So seed support in the back of the room, and also seed questions around the room. This was taught to me by one of my good friends, and basically when I started first talking at user groups, it was very hard for me to understand whether I was going too fast. because if you know me, I have a tendency to talk really, really fast, especially when I get really, really nervous, and sometimes it's not possible for people to sort of understand me or convey the message that I want to convey. So my friend taught me this trick. She would stand in the back of the room and she would use her hand motion to let me know that I needed to slow down if she noticed that people were losing connection with me while I was presenting. And this is extremely important if you are going to be able to talk to large audiences and big rooms. Have some eyes out there in the audience that can give you sort of signals from the back of the room to tell you to correct your items. You can sort of like sync up with them before and have a little powwow to get all the hands actions going. Next is basically see the questions around the room, right? No one wants your best friend to be able to ask all the questions, but you know, the audience may not have questions because you're going to give them a douse of content and they're going to have to sort of think about that for a while. And it's not really until the next day, unless they're really passionate about the topic, that they really start really understanding, well, what did I really learn yesterday? So you may also try to seed questions around the room because you don't want all the questions, especially in a big audience, coming directly from just one person or your buddy. This is one thing that's it's an old hat trick, and we use it all the time, even in some of the things I do today. Number 5 is be informal, be relatable, show and own your swagger. And what I mean by that is if you're presenting something, it helps that like if you could relate yourself to a developer, right? If you're a developer and you know for a fact that there's usually sort of some animosity between developers and QA people, right? Like call it out and make it humorous, right? Because they're going to be thinking it, and if you can relate to your audience, that also builds their confidence that you actually do practically know what you're talking about, and you're just not spitting out information. All right, next slide. Only a couple more to go. So my favorite part of giving presentations is watching for the light bulb moment, or lack thereof, right? So when that moment when you're in front of your developers and you see that click because they thought of a use case, right? Latch on to that. And if it's that big of a light bulb moment where it's really noticeable, ask that person to convey to the audience what they just thought, because one of the things that is very valuable is audience members relating to other audience members, right? And so the ability for one peer to share their knowledge of what they just gained mid presentation is very, very powerful, because the other peers may not have been thinking that way. But also, if there are no light bulb moments, you have to be aware of that too, because it means that people are disconnecting from your content, or maybe the way that you have chosen to present your information could be improved. And to do this, the best way that Amber mentioned is really tell a story, take people on a journey, and if you need to, go ahead and run through your process or your show notes before the actual presentation with a trusted individual that will tell you the truth. This is something that I tried out when I was presenting at Jaipur Dev Fest a couple months ago, and it's don't be afraid to pull on heartstrings by using empathy, which translates to be transparent, be authentic. At Jaipur Dev Fest, I actually told a story about some things that have happened to me over 2016, and how I prevailed with the help of my Salesforce Ohana. And it's felt so rewarding to really convey that to the audience and have them reciprocate those feelings, and also have them validate that, yes, I did have a family and everyone has tough times, but with the support around, especially the Salesforce Ohana, you'll get through what you need to get through. And so don't be afraid to feel emotion while you're presenting. Everyone's not perfect, and everyone will want to relate to you or comfort you, depending on what the scenario is. Number 8, you will be your worst critic. This is the bane of my existence when I do presentations, right? 5 seconds after I step off stage, I'm always like, oh my gosh, did I do well? That really, really sucked. What could I have done better? I just feel really, really bad. and everyone's walking up to me and saying, really good talk. I really, really enjoyed that, which brings me to the other point is no matter what you say, folks will say you did great. And so just know that the feeling of being your worst critic is temporary. It doesn't last too long, but don't beat yourself up around it. There'll be more presentations to work this out, and there's more down the road to sort of perfect your craft. And when people sort of say you did great, you want to be able to turn that around and ask open-ended questions. I have a British joke. If you've ever been or lived in the UK, you'll know that people who live in the UK are very, very polite. So regardless of if you did bad or good, they're still going to say you did great. And I love all my UK friends, but it's partially true. And so what I'll do is I'll ask open-ended questions. So I'll say, really, what did you take away from my talk today? And this response will allow me to validate exactly what they took away so that I can maybe enhance that piece or embellish it on my next presentation, or maybe some things that I felt really, really passionate about, I can ask, well, why didn't those things shine through so that I can work on my next presentation? My most important thing is I always leave people with an action item, right? So normally my presentation style is what, so what, and now what. And during the now what section, I basically ask them to do something or I give them a call to action. And so when I give them a call to action, I'll say, how and when do you plan to leverage the content that I shared today? And this is very rewarding because it will tell you how useful your content is and what people plan to do with it. Last but not least, point number 10 is don't stop. As Amber mentioned with Dale, it's not sort of a throw to a fence and I'm done. You're going to be really scared. You might not want to do number 2 or number 3 or presentation number 500, but you will progressively get better without knowing. I never knew I was a public speaker until I started getting invited to several events to speak to, and I guarantee you I'm more confident right now than I was 5 years ago when I spoke at my first user group meeting. So with that, those are my 10 points on tips for presentation delivery.
Thank you, Joshua. I think for a lot of us, having some easy points to live by, the simple can make the complex that much easier. So I appreciate you breaking it down in that manner for all of us. So as I mentioned earlier, you and Amber and Steve have all been inspirations to me in how I present. Who has been your inspiration? Like who really kicked you into gear that first time, and who do you go back to with each subsequent presentation?
Dale, so that award goes to Mrs. Jennifer Phillips. So Jennifer Phillips has been a coworker, a user group co-lead, my prior boss when I worked for Hilton, but also more importantly, a friend now. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was in the front of the room speaking and very nervous at my first user group meeting, she was in the back of the room giving me hand signals to slow down. So that award goes to Jennifer Phillips, and I really appreciate for her starting me down this path.
Very nice. Well, again, thank you very much for contributing to this. And again, hopefully many of those listening will be inspired. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And so our third and final guest panelist on this webinar is really someone who needs no introduction from Boston. It's Mr. Steve Mullis. Steve, take it away.
Thanks, Dale. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Mullis, or some of you may know me as Steve Mo, and want to kind of tell my personal journey to becoming a public speaker. So, sorry about that. A little bit about me. So I'm a Salesforce MVP. Also, I'm a community college dropout, a self-taught Salesforce admin developer, and I try to, use that when I'm presenting. And, I try to speak to that, that self-taught admin and developer out there in the audience who's probably struggling getting up and running on their org. I've been a Dreamforce speaker since 2009, my first Dreamforce. Currently, the world record holder for the most F-bombs by a Dreamforce speaker. The previous record was 0, held by every other Dreamforce speaker before or since. And I also was a stand-up comic a long, long time ago. So a little backstory about that. I had terrible, terrible social anxiety. I was terrified of any kind of public speaking. I would get dizzy and think I was going to pass out if I was in line at the supermarket and I got trapped between two groups of people and the line wasn't moving fast enough. So how did I get into stand-up comedy? So, and with the record for most F-bombs, I have my own safe harbor statement from Salesforce. So how did I get started? So I was actually I went back to school and was taking some computer classes, and one of my teachers had recommended this class called Workshop in Creativity. He said that if you're going to be writing instructions for a machine that thinks, it's a really handy course to take because it teaches you to think outside the box and approach things from different directions, stuff like that. So I took the class, and it was as he described it. You'd do puzzles. No 2 weeks were alike. And at one point, I passed in some writing, and the teacher said, your writing's really funny. You should think about using it in your final project. And during one of the classes, we did an exercise, and we talked about what is something you really love but would never do and why. And I said, well, I really love stand-up comedy, but I would never do it in a million years because I'm terrified of public speaking. And so the teacher said, that sounds like a great idea for a final project, because your final project was supposed to be this huge leap for you, like doing something in a different direction and stuff like that. So I wound up doing it at class, and I probably came as close as I've ever come to having a heart attack. And at the end of the class, he handed me back my notebook, and he said, I want to know if it's okay with you if I give you an incomplete. And I resisted the urge to jump over my desk and stab him in the neck, because I knew that if I did whatever he asked, I was probably going to get a 4.0, and I really wanted to get that 4.0 for the class to maintain my GPA. So he said, I want you to go to a comedy club, and I want you to do it for real. And when you do it, call me, let me know, and I'll be there. And so he was holding that over my head, and so I agreed to do it. I did it, and it didn't go that bad. It went better than I could have ever expected, and he was there, and he gave me the 4.0, and I got the bug, and so I did it. I worked as a, on the side. I had a full-time job because stand-up comedy does not pay. So I did it for about 2 or 3 years. I probably did about 70 or 80 shows around Boston and New England as an opener or a middler, like small local shows. But doing that, I learned a lot of tips. I mean, if I had a chance to sit with a veteran comic, I would just pick their brain, ask them every little detail, and they would share. They were, more than willing to share their knowledge with me. And even though I don't do stand-up comedy anymore, I've taken a lot of the lessons I learned doing it and applied it to my public speaking, and because they're applicable in a lot of different scenarios. I mean, and it could be just little stuff like, little tips like, nobody wants to see a performer on stage or somebody giving a presentation reading out of a notebook. So little things like, write like a little one word that jogs your memory about the list of jokes that you're going to do. Write it on a napkin, bring a glass of water on stage with you, and every couple of minutes, if you need to jog your memory, go over, take a sip of water, and take a glance down at your napkin. The audience won't be able to tell that you're reading off a cheat sheet, but you'll be able to, stay on point, stay on focus. Little things like that. Little things like, and this is one that comes in handy if you're at a small user group meeting. Nobody wants to sit at the front of the room. So I was doing this, show one time at a little bar, and I got there early with some of the other comics, and one of these veteran comics, he started taking his coat, his gloves, his hat, his scarf, and he started putting them on the seats at the back of the club, and he took mine and he did the same thing. He goes, nobody wants to sit at the front, but if you put your clothes on the seats at the back, people think those seats are taken, so it forces them to sit a little closer to the stage than they normally would if these seats were empty. Little things like that you can do it like a user group meeting to get people to fill up those front row seats. Little things like, this kind of sounded oxymoronic to me when I first heard it from a veteran, but the bigger the crowd, the easier it is. If you're speaking to 10, 20 people and you say something, or you're telling a joke, and only like half the audience gets it, that's only 5 people laughing or 10 people laughing. But if you're in a room of 100, 200, 300 people, if a third of the people in the room get the joke, now you got 30, 40, 50 people laughing, and laughter is contagious. So I find that actually doing rooms like Dreamforce are easier to me sometimes than like local user groups. So I want to talk about finding your presentation style, finding your voice. That's something that one of the veteran comics told me and other rookies when we were coming up about our writing style, our presentation style. Keeping it real, speaking from things you've really done. They're more relatable, they're more repeatable, and the audience is there to listen. They came there to see you present your idea, your solution, your pitch, whatever it is, and telling your story, getting your story across to them. So, when I say like finding your voice, this is one of my favorite all-time comics from when I was growing up. A local guy named Stephen Wright. And this is one of his jokes. He had a very unique delivery. They were like quick one-liners, kind of offbeat. And his style of joke telling, I mean, I love it, but it's not my style. So when I present, I don't try to mimic him. I try to find a conversational tone, a way of telling. I give my presentations the way that I tell a story. When I'm presenting to a user group and I'm talking about a formula I built or a solution I built, a report or something like that, I try to mimic another one of my favorite comics, a guy named Louis C.K. And actually, this first line, this is one of the most valuable lessons I learned before I even did my very first open mic night. There's a local stand-up comic named Steve Sweeney, and he's a legend. He's been around for like 30, 40 years, and he never made it huge outside of Boston. He never made that massive national breakthrough, but he's revered in the local stand-up community. And right before I was about to do my first open mic night, I bumped into him at a restaurant, and I saw him leaving. And I was like, all right, I gotta pick his brain. If I can get any little nugget from him, I gotta do it. So I run up and I'm like, Steve, a huge fan, and I'm about to do my first open mic night. And if there's anything you can tell me, anything at all, I just really appreciate it. And he looked at me, and he shook his head and goes, no. And he walked away. And then he stopped. He was just breaking my balls. And he turned around, and he said, a good joke told poorly bombs 9 times out of 10. But a mediocre joke told well crushes every time. He said, focus on the delivery, not the material. And he could not have been more right. I can't count how many times I would see comics who had great jokes, but they didn't deliver them effectively, and they just like would have like a horrible set. And I would see other guys who were essentially telling knock-knock jokes, but they sold them. And they did such a great job selling those jokes that the audience would be like falling over laughing at these lame, horrible jokes because the delivery was so convincing. So I try to do that when I'm delivering content at user groups or at Dreamforce. You know, I tell the story of the process that I built or the problem that I solved. I mean, a lot of my presentations come from questions that were posted on the instance community or things that I built in my org. I talk about, what brought about what I was trying to solve, and then, I walk them through, the idea that I came up with, whether, the inspiration for the idea, lessons that I learned, if I used a new function or a new technology like Process Builder, for the first time, and I share, the headaches that I dealt with, the heartbreak. I talk about the heartbreak of building something that did everything they wanted it to do, and then they said no thanks at the end. Tips and tricks that I learned. People eat that stuff up. A little nugget that I use whenever if I'm doing a presentation that refers to checkbox fields. If you've never written a formula that references a checkbox field, you don't have to say in your formula checkbox field equals true. Just inserting the API field name of the checkbox field into the formula will give you the exact same result because it's a Boolean field. So when I'm presenting a checkbox formula at a user group or a Dreamforce, I mention that. It also gives me an opportunity to insert a joke. I mean, when I was speaking at Dreamforce one year, I was doing a presentation about a checkbox formula, and I said, you don't even have to say equals true. Just the checkbox field name is the same result. So you can save the true and false questions for your next date on eHarmony because you don't need them in a formula. Little things like that I can pass along, and also gives me a chance to insert a joke. Also, when you are telling the story of your formula or process or whatever it is you're presenting, an app you built or something like that, it's okay to embellish the story, and I try to use that as like a way to maybe lighten things up a little bit with like a funny slide or maybe exaggerate the situation to make it maybe a little bit funnier, lighten things up a little bit. So this is, I'm a huge Dave Chappelle fan, and one of the things I like about his style of joke telling is that, he speaks from real life experiences, and I try to emulate that whenever I'm delivering material at a user group or Dreamforce, because it's relatable, it resonates with the audience. Also, another thing is that, I struggled or obsessed with, making sure that I had all my talking points down, I had them memorized, but as my presentations got longer and longer, and 15, 20 minutes worth of material sometimes, it's hard to remember all that stuff off the top of your head, what your next slide is, what your next talking point is, and stuff like that. But when you speak from experience, it's easy to remember, it's easier to repeat, and it's more consistent. I always, and this again is another lesson that I learned from a veteran stand-up comic one night. A bunch of us rookies were hanging out, and this guy named Bob Marley, a local guy, he was just holding court, and he was another like local legend. And we talked about, you know, building your material and writing and stuff like that, and performance. And he said that, you know, if you write from a true life experience, you don't have to really, you don't need notes to remember that story, because it really happened to you. He used the analogy that, like, you know, if one Thanksgiving dinner your uncle came over, had a little bit too much to drink, and the dog chased the cat, and the cat jumped up on the table and knocked the turkey off the table, and the dog ate the turkey, and then your drunk uncle picked up a drumstick and started eating it too. If that really happened, you will never forget that Thanksgiving dinner. You'll be able to recall that story today, a week from now, a month from now, and if your PowerPoint shits the bed, or your laptop crashes, you won't even have to like look at your notes. You won't have to look at the screen. You'll be able to repeat that story again and again, time after time, because it really happened. And your telling of that story is going to be more natural. The audience is going to be able to pick up on that, and you can embellish it a little bit, make it funnier, make it more dramatic, or whatever you're going for. So, the counter to that is, if you try to use, an abstract scenario or a niche business requirement that has like a really narrow application, I mean, using the analogy of something that really did happen to you, something that you really did, versus like, the most complicated process you ever built, the most complicated formula you ever built, or something like that. But it's got like a really narrow scope, and it's going to only appeal to like 10% of that audience, and it's not something that you do every day, that you use every day. It's harder to remember all those talking points, every little thing. So like, if, as opposed to that Thanksgiving dinner, story, unless you actually were sitting at a bar and a priest, a rabbi, a nun, and a duck walked in, you're going to have to remember every little detail of that story. And it's going to be harder to repeat, and it's going to, it's not going to come across as natural. It's not going to, you're not going to be speaking from a real life event. You're going to be, you're essentially telling a lie, and that does come across to the audience. So I always try to, build my presentations and my delivery off of, speaking from the heart, a real process I built, a real solution I came up with, and pepper it with the, the lessons I learned. And last, you don't get bonus points for dropping the word chaotic in a triple word score in your presentation. So, I try to, present the way that I actually build things and do stuff. So, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve. Well, we have a few minutes left on the session, and so we're going to open up the line to if anybody out there has any questions.
And yeah, you guys can put, this is Phil, you guys can post your questions while you guys are doing that. Let's just take 1 minute, talk about the next session. I know we're coming up on the hour here, and we're going to make sure we wrap up on time. But we have 3 more of these webinars. The next one is very timely. It is about choosing your topic and submitting a winning proposal. I'm really excited because there was a post from Mike Gerholt about, guess what, Dreamforce 17 speaking proposal phase or opportunity. That's coming up, and that opens up on June 1st, I believe. I took a look, and last year they kept it open for an entire month, which means that it would still be open when we do this webinar. So definitely register for that, bit.ly/MVP-Prez-June. Register for that one. We have Jody Wagner, Amber, again, repeat speaker, and Jean-Michel. And just so you know, these were selected by you guys. I submitted a poll out, and the MVP said these are the people that we want to hear from. So just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of that. And Dale, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the panelists if you want to facilitate. We just have a couple minutes, so guys, just make sure your answers are really brief because we don't have time to go into too much detail. So I'm going to go ahead and put myself on pause, hand it back over to you, Dale.
Well, thank you, Phil. I don't have any further questions for the panelists other than to say you all been heroes and inspirations to me and probably everybody else that has joined this call and will listen to this in the future. Y'all are my heroes. I can't say thank you enough for how you've helped carve all of our journeys, really. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you on the June call.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everyone. Cheers.